Thank you for joining us today. We will wait just a minute or so while everyone gets logged into Zoom for our webinar. Next slide, please. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, California Department of Education Supporting the Transition to Elementary School, a Critical Strategy to Strengthen P3 Alignment. This webinar is the latest installment of our preschool through third grade or P3 alignment webinar series, hosted by the Opportunities for All branch at CDE or the California Department of Education. We are extremely excited to be here with you today. I am Valentina Ware, and I am one of the presenters for today's webinar. Before we start, we would like to let everyone know that we will have this slide deck available for those who want a copy of this webinar. We're also very excited to announce that the recording of our most recent P through 3 webinar, Centering and Cultivating Black Families' Voices to Strengthen Preschool through Third Grade Alignment, will be posted in the next few days. I will now pass it over to Sarah Neville Morgan, the Deputy Superintendent of Public Instruction of the Opportunities for All branch at the California Department of Education, who will introduce our speakers and begin our exploration of the importance of supporting the transition to elementary school for all children and their families. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Valentina. Good afternoon, and thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Sarah Neville Morgan, and I'm the Deputy Superintendent of Public Instruction over the Opportunities for All branch at the California Department of Education. I would like to welcome you all today on behalf of the CDE and our State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurmond. We are truly happy to have you all join us today for our 13th edition of the OFAB Pre-K through Grade 3 or P3 webinar series. Today, I am joined by 3 CDE colleagues, Stephen Profiter, our Early Education Division Director, Shanna Berkles Vasquez, our Education Administrator over the UPK Implementation and Support Office within the Early Education Division, and Valentina Ware, our Child Development Consultant working with Shanna in her office. Next slide, please. I want to start our time together today by discussing the importance of supporting transition into elementary school. At the CDE, our P3 initiative, which we launched in partnership with the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, stems from a belief that intentionally building upon the skills children gain in preschool and the early grades is critical to closing opportunity gaps in children's early years. And this in turn helps close the emerging achievement gaps we see in third grade standardized testing. Our vision is that California will provide a strong and early start to education for all children with high quality, joyful, developmentally informed, inclusive, and rigorous P3 learning opportunities, beginning with equitable access to universal pre-K or UPK. Supporting the transition to elementary school is a critical opportunity to ensuring continuity and coherence as children transition from early learning settings or their homes into our public school system. When children experience discontinuities between early learning settings and their first year in elementary school, they may be at greater risk for academic and social adjustment problems. Effective transitions not only matter for children and families alike. As we all work together to support the transition to elementary school, it is important to keep the community that you are serving and their lived experiences in mind. Communities that have been historically and systematically marginalized may have less trust in the TK schools, which makes intentionally engaging, supporting, and listening to families even more critical. Although today we are focused on the transition into elementary school, we want to recognize the importance of the prenatal to preschool period, as well as the years following third grade, and the many critical transitions children will experience. Yet the transition into the K-12 or TK-12 system can be a very abrupt change for children and their families with long-lasting impacts. Implementing a well-rounded combination of practices to support this transition is key. This is why I and our state superintendent and all of us here at CDE are really excited to share a new resource, California's Great Start Transitions to Elementary School Kit. We will be sending these resources to all of you following today's webinar. And I have to do a special shout out to Shanna, who really helped lead all of this, along with Beth Malloy. Without you, we wouldn't be here today raising up this wonderful toolkit. For now, I'd like to pass the mic over to Stephen Profiter to share a little bit more about the why we developed this resource and what it includes. Stephen?
Thank you, Sarah. So in recognition of the research on the importance of smooth transitions to elementary school for children and families, we decided to collect additional data about what our elementary schools and their partners are currently doing to support the critical process of transitions. At the California Department of Education, we take a data-informed approach to our work. And in that spirit, we looked at our 21-22 Universal Pre-Kindergarten Program report data from our county offices of education. And we also conducted a survey on transition practices to identify where gaps in practice may exist. Our data showed that local education agencies and their TK-12 and early learning partners have interest in better supporting families and their children through the critical transition, but they need additional resources and support to implement those best practices. So specifically, we found that 57% of county offices of education are interested in guidance on best practices for smooth transitions through the P3 continuum. 28% of county offices of education are interested in templates or frameworks for drafting a P3 vision that incorporates both the voices of partners and parents. And 70.7% of local education agencies and early childhood education partners are interested in implementing transition to transitional kindergarten or kindergarten activities, as well as 47.8% of LEA and ECE partners would like resources to support curriculum and assessment alignment. So in response to this data, we embarked on a process to work within the California Department of Education, as well as with our partners to develop our Transition to Elementary School Toolkit as a resource to develop strategies to create smooth and effective transitions to elementary school. And to take us into our next pieces on the importance of successful transitions, I'm happy to hand off to Shanna. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Steve. As Sarah mentioned earlier, today we are introducing the Transition to Elementary Tools Kit, a resource intended to support the development of policies and strategies that bridge early childhood education, ECE, and transitional kindergarten, TK, through 12 systems. Our hope is to support a smooth transition by promoting practices that intentionally build off of children's academic and social emotional skills, which we know are critical for children's later in life success and well-being. By narrowing in on the pre-K 12 to 3rd grade, we are not only working to ease the transition for children, but in promoting the message that elementary schools can and should learn from preschool settings so that kindergarten, 1st grade, and 2nd grade classrooms can be more nurturing, joyful, and developmentally appropriate environments for young children. In spending this focused time on strengthening the PK to 3rd grade system, we are ensuring that any following efforts or investments made in our infants and toddlers are sustained and not lost. Next slide, please. One concept that is key to supporting successful transitions and which we unpack in our toolkit is the concept of school readiness. For many families, school readiness can mean the act of physically getting ready for school, such as buying school supplies, reading books, going school shopping, and picking out that special first day of school outfit. For educators, it's so much more, and has been heavily focused in early childhood education, but its meaning has shifted over time. As the field has grown and our understanding of child development and what children need in kindergarten to thrive has shifted, so has the use of the term school readiness and what supporting school readiness means for policy and practice. And we hope to support a more nuanced understanding of school readiness with our toolkit. This toolkit includes 3 coordinated elements to support school readiness highlighted on this slide: ready children, ready schools, and ready communities. Ready children refers to the overall development, approaches to learning, language development, and cognition and general knowledge to support the children's preparedness to not only engage in the structured learning environment, but also benefit from those learning experiences. Ready schools are schools that can meet the needs of all students. Schools that work to facilitate the transition between home and school and strive for continuity, are culturally affirming, and actively work to create a welcoming school climate where children and families have a sense of belonging that inspires joy and the love of learning for all children. Ready schools meet every child where they are and support all adults to engage every child in meaningful ways. And third, ready communities ensure families and the larger community the support and services they need to support all children's readiness for school. Schools are responsible for reaching out and welcoming community members' input and collaboration. If you're in a community where tribal nations are present, schools must be intentional about enhancing the well-being of children and families in these communities. School readiness is enhanced when schools, families, and community members work collaboratively to ensure that every child is ready to engage in learning. Next slide, please. Another critical component to supporting effective transitions and aligning developmentally appropriate practice and coherence across the early years is play. Play is the most natural way for children to explore, discover, and learn. Play-based learning supports children's learning and development across cognitive, social, and emotional, and physical domains. These are all foundational domains that can be included in the classroom by utilizing P3 strategies that ensure a combination of child-directed, educator-guided, and educator-directed experiences. On a continuum, play in every young child's classroom can and should include every type of play. There's free play, where educators observe, reflect, and ensure the availability of time, space, and materials that are responsive to children's interests. Inquiry is where educators extend child-initiated ideas, interests, and explorations by asking questions and providing opportunities for investigation. Collaborative play is where educators use opportunities to play with children to incorporate targeted skill development into their play. For example, supporting math skills by introducing pretend money into a child's grocery store play. There's also playful learning. where educators design targeted learning activities that are play-based. For example, putting on a puppet show or conducting a scavenger hunt. And finally, learning games. Educators engage children in prescribed activities with rules designed to facilitate specific skill development, usually in literacy and math. For example, matching games, dice games, or word games. Our youngest learners thrive when more of their time is spent engaged in play-based learning activities that are child-centered. Next slide, please. We are so excited about this playful learning tree graphic, which is also included in our toolkit and depicts a deeper exploration of what instructional time can and should look like in a classroom that embraces play-based learning strategies. Learning thrives in an environment that celebrates and affirms cultural and linguistic diversity, actively combats racism and pursues equity, embraces inclusion, and promotes belonging for each and every child. We are committed to providing educators with the tools and resources to incorporate more play in all areas of the classroom, including learning centers, small group math and literacy instruction, music, movement, and mindfulness, read-alouds, and community building and teacher modeling, which are all included on the leaves of the tree. And it's important to note that the playful learning tree has roots in strengthening home language skills and building social emotional skills. To continue the topic of play-based learning, we are excited to share that we'll be holding 2 webinars, The Power of Playful Learning from Preschool through 3rd Grade for School Leaders, and The Power of Playful Learning from Preschool through 3rd Grade for Educators in early August. We'll share more information on these exciting webinars in our P3 alignment listserv soon. Next slide, please. In addition to exploring these critical concepts, the toolkit lays out an 8-step process for intentionally connecting early childhood education programs and TK-12 educators and leaders to develop policies and practices that support children and families as they move into elementary school. The purpose of these steps is to support partnerships and the development of coherent policies that lead to the implementation of effective strategies to support every child and family during this critical transition. I will now pass it to Valentina to discuss the first 4 steps on how to develop transition to elementary school policies. Next slide.
Thank you, Shanna. Step 1 is to assess your current policies and procedures. It is critical to include the community you serve, work, and collaborate with. The gathering of information can be done informally in one-on-one conversations, focus groups, or through surveys that include parents and staff. It is important to use the data to see what you are already currently doing and what gaps need to be addressed with data to help support you through this process to remain focused on the desired goals and outcomes based on the data received. Transition self-assessment or reflection tools, such as the examples included in the resource section of the toolkit, can be helpful as you begin your steps to develop transition to elementary school policies. Next slide, please. Step 2 is to determine interest holders for policy development. When determining your interest holders, think carefully about how to involve members of communities that may not typically be represented in these conversations, especially representatives from tribal nations, communities with families who speak a language other than English at home, families experiencing homelessness, and so on. As in step 1, the goal is to capture the entire community to have accurate data and equitable representation of the community served. Next slide, please. Step 3 is to develop a logic model or theory of change. A logic model details the relationship between your vision or goal, the resources you can put towards your goal, activities you do, what happens because of those activities, and how children, families, or systems are improved in either a short, mid, or long-term plan. A co-created logic model will assure that all partners are represented in the plan and feel equally invested in the objectives of the policy and strategies, understand how it will impact outcomes for children, families, and systems, and commit to the collective individual activities needed to be successful. Next slide, please. Step 4 is to create a data collection and evaluation plan. There is no need to collect data that will not be used. It is important that when considering data, that you identify the data that will be most useful to you. The evaluation plan details do not stop once the document is created. Transition planning is meant to be an ongoing process. I will now pass it back to Shanna to continue with steps 5 through 8. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Valentina. Step 5 is to identify feasible strategies. There are many transition to elementary school strategies, but it's important to choose those that fit within your budget and capacity, as well as ensuring that the selection of strategies chosen are supported by community engagement with attention to the needs of all children. Consider the children and families in your community, their backgrounds and experiences, children with disabilities, multilingual learners, tribal children, and children who experience racial bias and discrimination. Most activities will not need additional funding, but they might require a shift in how funding is allocated. This is an important piece of the step to keep in mind when considering how each strategy affects the children and families involved in these communities. Next slides, please. Step 6 is to identify implementation partners and a timeline. When identifying your implementation partners, it's important to include your interest holders that were selected in step 2. Keep in mind that this group will evolve to include direct services staff, as examples are listed of some staff that may be included in this process, as they are the ones that will be directly impacted by the implementation of the policies. Timelines that are selected, whether your program decides to do it on a large or small group setting, need to be clear, attainable, and complementary of the work that people are already doing. The goal is to enhance the work that is already being done. You deserve credit for what you're already working on and the opportunity to make the work even better, with the added opportunity to strengthen any identified gaps. Next slide, please. So for step 7 is to implement policies and procedures. So depending on the desired outcomes, identified strategies and active participants necessary to bring the policy to life, the road to implementation may differ. The goal is to have an unobstructed vision and consistent communication about the agreed upon transition to elementary school strategies, policies, and procedures. Next slide. And then finally, step 8 is evaluate and improve. Using formal and informal feedback from parents, educators, community members, and interest holders is a critical piece to the success of the development of policies for the transition to elementary school. Each process will be unique to your program, but the key is to have a process in place that incorporates consistent strategies for continuous improvement that is reflective of the changes that happen within the community as families move through their children's transition to elementary school and beyond. Next slide, please. In this toolkit, we've also included a variety of editable resources and links that you can use to assist you as you begin or continue your journey towards supporting children and families with their transition to elementary school. In this toolkit, you will find resources such as a logic model guidance and template, transition to elementary school self-assessment tool, sample continuous improvement survey for parents and educators, a sample family information questionnaire, and sample pre-K to elementary educator transition worksheet. On the next few slides, Valentina will be going into more detail of the content of each of these mentioned resources and templates. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Shanna. I'm going to begin with the logic model guidance and template. This template includes 7 steps towards development of a logic model that will support your program through their development of transition to elementary school policies. Starting with step 1, develop a vision statement that are examples of program self-assessment questions to help develop your program vision. Second, step 2, identify any resources you currently have in place that could be used to support the transition to elementary school. Third, step 3 is based on the goal you identified in step 1 when developing your program vision statement. This is when you will determine what long-term outcomes for children, families, and educators you expect to see, and what will be different for the children, families, and educators in your community once you have met your program long-term goals. For step 4, you will think about the most impactful activities your resources can support and how they relate to your goal or vision statement and your program's desired long-term outcomes. Step 5 is the time to do some program self-reflection. How will you know that your activities are being implemented effectively? Note that output should reflect evidence that the activities you have put in place are being implemented at the levels needed to impact the outcomes you are hoping to achieve for your program. For step 6, you will find ways to track your progress, such as identifying whether there are short-term or mid-term outcomes that can help track your progress towards the long-term outcomes you are seeking to achieve for your program. And finally, step 7, a critical step for continuous success. Regularly reassess whether your inputs and identified activities are sufficient to achieve your goals. If your assessment determines that you are not seeing the outcomes you expected, it is okay to make changes to your originally identified activities. Next slide, please. Next, I want to share the Transition to Elementary School Self-Assessment Tool. This is another resource within the Transition to Elementary School Toolkit that will help identify key strategies you are currently implementing in your program, as well as help identify if your program would like to prioritize specific strategies that are most feasible within your program's budget and capacity. The goal is that each key strategy is aligned with connection strategies provided in the toolkit. The sample transition activities on the self-assessment tool are to help build connections specifically for child to school, family to school, program or provider to school, and community to school. A sample child to school activity included is considering a child's need to nap and or rest during the TK and kindergarten day in partnership with the expanded learning programs. This is a critical activity because if children are tired, they cannot learn or perform to their best ability. A sample family to school activity included is providing opportunities for parents to engage in planning activities, offer input and feedback, and lead activities when appropriate. Consider having a variety of opportunities because what works for one family may not be the same for another. We want to make all families feel included, supported, and that their voice has value in their child's education. A sample program or provider to school activity included is ensuring elementary educators and leaders are equipped to support play-based learning activities. Many opportunities for play that is non-teacher directed and teacher directed are key components for young children's development. It's important that everyone working with the child and family are on the same page for consistency that will support the child's overall success. A sample community to school activity included is facilitating family networks and connecting families to each other to strengthen school or program community bonds. Families are an educator's most valuable resource. Connecting families to each other makes it that much more powerful when done effectively, and it will strengthen the overall community being served. In this self-assessment tool, there's also a method to track your progress on if your program is currently implementing these sample transition activities or planning on making it a priority to implement the sample activity listed to assist you in keeping your program on track to meet your goals. Next slide, please. The next resource I would like to go into detail about is the Sample Continuous Improvement Survey for families and educators. These samples allow families and educators the opportunity to provide feedback anonymously for the continuous improvement of the program to meet the needs of the families and educators. There are 2 samples provided in the toolkit, one specifically for families and the second for educators. A sample question from the survey is, the family engagement opportunities available to me work for my child and family. 1, strongly disagree. 2, disagree. 3, neutral. 4, agree. 5, strongly agree. And NA or inapplicable. When families can provide feedback anonymously, it is more authentic and the feedback will be more valuable to your program. A sample question from the educator survey is, opportunities for classroom visits and or collaboration with the prior teacher of the student transitioning were available to facilitate my support of all children. 1, strongly disagree. 2 disagree. 3, neutral. 4, agree. 5, strongly agree. And NA or inapplicable. When there is collaboration with the early learning teacher and the elementary teacher, the transition will be less disruptive to the student and will be much smoother, setting the child up for more opportunities for success, as well as allowing the new teacher the opportunity to create the opportunities for the child transitioning. Next slide, please. The next resource in the Transition to Elementary School Toolkit is the Sample Family Information Questionnaire. The Family Information Questionnaire is provided as a reference only. You will want to modify the form to meet the needs of your community. Remember that when considering the community, it is all aspects, including families, teachers, local preschool programs, not limited to California State preschool programs, Head Start, private programs, subsidies, elementary schools, and so forth. The goal of this family questionnaire is to get to know the child and family. This form will help you start building a positive relationship with the family from the very beginning. The questions asked will let them know that you care and are interested in who they are to help meet the needs of their child and family as they transition into elementary school. Next slide, please. The final resource in the Transition to Elementary School Toolkit is the Sample Pre-K to Elementary Educator Transition Worksheet. This resource, like the previous resource, the Family Information Questionnaire, is a template to provide reference only. Please feel free to also modify this form to meet the unique needs of your community. The goal of this form is to have communication between the early learning teacher and the elementary school teacher of the student that is transitioning. This form will provide you information such as the parent and student's name and or what the name the child prefers to be called, the program they are transitioning from, family information, student strengths, and any additional information such as if the child has an IEP or health concerns, and any additional suggestions or notes. Thank you so much for attending to learn more about California's Great Start Transition to Elementary School Toolkit. I will now pass it to Shanna to continue the webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Valentina. So now we are very excited to move into our panel discussion. To get us started on the next slide, we will begin by introducing our moderator for today's discussion panel. Slide. Our moderator for today's discussion panel is Stephen Kellner. Steve serves as the Director of Program Sustainability and Growth for California Education Partners, where he develops and delivers a clear external communication strategy that supports the recruitment of districts and funders while informing other external stakeholders about the organization's work. Additionally, he works directly with superintendents to provide coaching support and coherence. Over his 30 years in public education, Steve has served as a classroom teacher, site and district administrator, and superintendent. Under Steve's leadership, the West Sonoma Union High School District was recognized as one of the top 100 districts in California. Thank you so much, Steve, for joining us today. He will now be introducing our wonderful panelists that we have here with us today. And they'll be engaging with him in conversation around transitions from early learning settings to elementary school. Next slide.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Shannon. I want to let the panelists introduce themselves in just a moment. But We all know that preschool can have a significant and lasting impact on student learning and development, and that's why you're all here. But we also know how quickly these gains can fade out if they're not connected to a top-notch kindergarten and elementary program. And while my organization, California Education Partners, has been working with over 30 districts across the state on this issue, I'm happy to tell you that we have some outstanding panelists who each work on this issue every single day. And I'll let them introduce themselves while they also give you an answer to this question. What do you think is the most valuable benefit of early childhood and TK-12 providers partnering to support the transition to kindergarten and elementary school? And we'll start with Luis.
Thank you, Stephen. And thank you to everyone at CDE for this great opportunity and for spotlighting such an important part of what we know makes the success of children and families and schools, and that is effective and smooth transitions. I'm Luis Bautista, the Executive Director for Head Start and Early Learning at the Los Angeles County Office of Education. And what we know is that the research tells us that children who attend high-quality early learning programs experience extremely positive social, emotional, behavioral, and cognitive outcomes, and they're better prepared to succeed in elementary school. And successful transitions help children sustain those gains that they've acquired through their early learning experience. So we don't want to see a drop off, right, in all of that rich learning and development that has happened. So supporting a successful transition really goes a long way. Head Start's approach, right, is a comprehensive approach to school readiness. And that means, just as you heard earlier, we're working to make sure that children are ready for school, that families are ready to support their children's learning, and that schools are ready for children. And I think the most valuable benefit of partnering is that all parties are ready to make the most of those learning opportunities.
Thank you, Luis. Maria, why don't we hear from you next?
Hi all, my name is Maria Suho, and I'm the Director of Kindergarten Readiness at Oakland Unified School District. My charge is to support all of our families and our young students in pre-K to have a smooth transition into elementary school. So what do I think is the most beneficial aspect of partnering for transitions to elementary schools? I think that from the perspective of an LEA, it would be the streamline of family support services, which in turn leads to better transition activities for children. In school districts, it could be really challenging to have true P12 alignment given the nuances of early childhood programmings in such a large program. But at OUSD, I have seen that when there exists synergy between early childhood units and early childhood and other district units, such as special education, enrollment, Office of Equity, there could be great outcomes that families benefit from this horizontal alignment, such as kinder transition activities that are targeted for families obtaining special ed services, our non-English speaking families, and other families that reside at the margins of opportunity.
Thank you so much, Maria. And now let's hear from Dr. DeMonica.
It looks like she might be having some technical issues, so maybe we can come to her.
Great. We will circle back. Dr. Ballesteros, why don't you go next?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everybody. It's really a great opportunity to be here and talk about this very important thing about transition. But I think for me, the greatest benefit is really the partnering, the partnering with community, partnering with early learning partners. One of my great early learning partners is here with me. And I think that partnering brings collective wisdom and brings the collaboration and also the coherence that we need. This transition to elementary, it's also really important to acknowledge it's really a life-changing event. it's difficult. It's really hard to transition from early learning where children have been, some of them 5 years into now elementary school. And so to support families and to support the children to build an additional community, I think is really what this work is. And it's hard work. It can't be done alone. And so working with the partners and getting to know each other and know our values and our mission and the vision and how they connect is really important for families and children. I forgot to say, I am the director of early learning for the Alum Rock School District in East San Jose. It's actually the same school district that I grew up with. And this has been my district since I started kindergarten, and now I'm the director here. So it's a very important role for me in working with partners like Steve Scott Moore, from Cadango. Again, acknowledging that this is a life-changing event for families, I think is really important that we hold in our heart and in our mind when we're transitioning families.
Thank you so much. And Scott, you were queued up. Why don't you go next?
Thank you, Stephen and Dr. Ballesteros. Good afternoon. I'm Scott Moore. I'm CEO of Cadango. We're a leading early childhood nonprofit here in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we provide a lot of preschool and infant toddler childcare in partnership with the Alum Rock School District in East San Jose. And, our goal is for families and their children to hardly even know that their preschool is provided by one organization and their TK and K is provided by a different organization. We really want to build a seamless experience and one where we can build a bridge that's easy to walk between that preschool room and that TK room or the K room, so that ultimately children feel safe when they start TK. They feel like they belong. They know they belong. They're confident learners, and they can bring their curiosity and joy to a new space without feeling scared or wondering, if this is a place for them. So that for us, we feel like that's the most important goal, is to try and create that sense of belonging and safety so that children can start thriving right away.
Thank you so much, Scott. And then last but certainly not least, we want to get the perspective of the teacher on our panel, Ms. DeMonica.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
We can. You sound great.
Okay. I'm sorry, I just got home because I was supposed to get a repair person to meet him here, but they're not here yet. So I'm running all around, but I'm here.
No worries. Just tell us where you teach and your perspectives.
Okay, well, my name is DeMonica Robinson. I'm a teacher at Lockwood Child Development Center. I work in an urban area where I service mainly low-income families, Latino and African American, and some Middle Easterns, ages 3 to 5. Well, they're now 4, turning 5. And I really enjoy what I do.
We really appreciate you taking the time to be here. Thank you so much. We're going to have another perspective and go around the panelists. Would love to know from each of you, as you think about the transition from early childhood to K-12, a lot of you mentioned the importance of including families in the process and making that transition as seamless as possible. Could you talk about a particular activity or a particular approach that your organization has done to make that transition seamless or really to support families? And so why don't we go again, Luis, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Stephen. I think that's a really great question. One thing I know that is critical to successful transitions is that we involve families early and in ways that really address their individual family needs and strengths, right? So some families are going to need a lot more information than others. Some are going to need to unpack what we're sharing with them, right? And really kind of understand it. So we really want to rely not on those one-size-fits-all approaches, right? Or one-off opportunities like a group orientation or, a flyer. That might be a good start, but it shouldn't be where we end. I think transitions should really be ongoing, right? And it should involve both sides staying connected to parents and to each other. One thing that I was thinking about as I was reviewing the transition to elementary school toolkit is that, especially now with the implementation of universal pre-K, there are a vast number of paths that children will take to get to kindergarten, right? They're going to enter public school from any number of private or subsidized programs, or, straight from home or from TK to kindergarten. Some might not even show up until first grade, right? So we really need to acknowledge that kind of vast background and experiences that families and children will bring. And effective strategies, right, can include things like preschoolers visiting kindergarten classrooms and having teachers visit families at home. And I think that these need to be done not in the week or month before the start of the school year, right, but really throughout that previous school year, so that families and children become comfortable and knowledgeable about what they're accessing. And I think, as Scott mentioned, really feel comfortable, right, and welcomed in these spaces. I think the other thing I'd like to mention is that sustainability is really key, right, to implementing and having effective transition practices in place. So you really want to be thinking about how to build a system across early education and elementary that can survive the departure of just key individuals, right? Often we have one person that's kind of in charge, and when she or he leaves, then the whole system kind of begins to falter. So think about how to really build out beyond just reliance on one individual. And that really means engaging early education and elementary teachers, maybe in like joint professional development, and participating in classroom visits and debriefs, and holding joint planning and articulation so that you're breaking down silos and really supporting a systems approach to this.
Thank you for those, Luis. Appreciate that. Maria, at OUSD, what are a couple specifics that you guys do to make that bridge as easy to navigate as possible?
Yes, hi. I want to say that firstly, it's for us, it's getting really rooted in equity in all of our family engagement practices, which are at the center of kinder transition work, and using home language to engage our families to understand the difference between early childhood programming and the school district, and also meeting families where they are. We have really strong bidirectional relationships between the school district and our community partners, whether it be Head Start, nonprofits, family childcare centers, so that we can meet families not just at the school district, but at their centers, in the community, to really support families in learning about what to expect when they enter kindergarten and TK in their language through community brokers, right? Like they're trusted providers or preschool providers, not just within OUSD. Also, one of the specific things that we do in Oakland Unified is our family navigators, our early childhood family navigators, who are culturally and linguistically reflective of the community, again, are also visiting families outside of the community, not just within OUSD, but outwardly facing. And then also, just getting specialized with kinder transition practices that affect families in different ways. Like, for example, our special education families, as they enter kinder and TK, from within OUSD and even the greater community have lots of questions. What does a day in the life of kindergarten look like in a inclusion class or a mild or moderate or severe special ed class? So because we have such strong relationships with our community partners in Oakland and a really strong sense of collaboration, we're able to share this out with the community and bring everybody on board to get this information in culturally and linguistically relevant ways. So from welcoming our Head Start partners into our school sites to us outwardly partnering with the community and just making sure that families get what they need. I also would like to add that Miss DeMonica Robinson, who's with us today, is doing amazing work at Lockwood CDC and Deep East Oakland to engage families. And I'm sure she's going to touch on that in a bit.
Yes, well, thank you, Maria, and let's go there right now with Ms. Robinson. What would be those key family relationships that help the child bridge from early learning and care into kindergarten?
Well, first of all, for me, before I even go to that section, I usually meet my parents at the beginning of the school year. And the most important for me is to learn their nationality. And once I learn the nationality, I can respect their culture, and then they build their trust with me. And that's where I start at. And then from there, I begin to do visiting at the kindergarten, going to the library at the kindergarten, at the elementary school, making connection with the kindergarten teacher, implementing some of the things I see in her classroom that I may not be doing. Most of them I'm doing, but not to toot my own horn, but it's true, I am. Just walking on the yard, just really having them exposed to it, as well as the parents. Each year we have, thanks to Maria Kindergarten Readiness Program, we meet with the parents every year. And then we have back to school night. And then I do a newsletter too, once a month for my parents to engage them of what's going on, the family meetings, the family engagement. I don't do the home visits, but I have them engaged in a number of things. So that's what works for me, is building that trust first.
Appreciate that, and absolutely, without the trust, there is no foundation to build it
Exactly.
on. So Dr. Ballesteros, tell us about Alum Rock and some of the specifics you guys do to build that bridge.
Well, luckily this morning we did one of those specifics. So we begin the tours in May with the families that are registered in the district. And so this morning we had 7 families come through. The most important thing for that is to have that representation of the family's language. And so we did have, a family that needed just Spanish. And so I'm part of that team in doing the tours. We also introduced the center director of our partners and our speech therapist. So we walk the families through. The TK teachers, the T4 TK teachers and the kindergarten teachers, they speak with the families, and it just so happened that a butterfly had come out of the cocoon. And so the children on the tour were so excited. And in the kindergarten, a chick had been born. And so they got to really experience that experiential at the end of a school year, right? Because we are at the end of the school year. Parents can see where the children end up, right, in their experience. And I think the tours are very important. So we did every Tuesday, a tour was open from 10:15 to 11:15. It's a team that does a tour, the principal, myself, the director of early learning. We had our speech therapist, we had the teachers. And so I think one of the important things too is at that point, every family gets our personal business cards. And so if they have any questions, I think having an individual contact for families, because they walk through the tour, they see all this excitement, they're following their 5-year-old who's going to the Chickies, is really important. It's like, what if something comes up after the tour? Who can I talk to? Who do I connect with? And so they all know they can connect with me. I am on site here, and we can respond. So access, availability to who's that individual that families can go to after a tour or after one of those experiential events, I think is very, very important.
Thank you for that, Dr. Ballesteros. I appreciate that. I'm going to shift a little bit. We've been very front-footed and very positive, but we know that there are challenges out there. We know that these systems can be very complex. And so I want to lean into the ideas of what obstacles you may have found over the years and how you've gone about trying to navigate some of those, whether they be across different systems, particularly challenging transitions. And this time, Maria, we'll start with you. What would you like to bring to the table regarding navigating particularly challenging system incoherence?
Yeah, thank you. Good question. And there's always challenges in this really important work. I think for us in a large urban school district, it's that everybody has a different sense of urgency when it comes to school readiness and the importance of tailored kinder transition practices. It might not seem particularly urgent for K-5 leaders in elementary schools or teachers who are currently holding in a lot and holding in multiple competing priorities to think about why kinder transition practices are important with families that they haven't met yet, right? They're still in preschool. So for them, it's backwards mapping. So I think that kind of work, the collaboration, and the challenge is that it takes time to build these connections and relationships, but you have to start with the willing. And I know for my particular experience, when I first came to OUSD 8 years ago, what I did was I met with preschool teachers, I met with kinder teachers, and I met with families to see what were the gaps, what was missing between that relationship. And I started with the willing and, built a small movement from that and marketed and made our successes around our kinder transition practices and our learnings, no matter how small or big, public. And I shared those ideas with my community within OUSD and outside of OUSD. And that has really helped to bring people on board and to get folks excited and has made it a district-wide initiative for us at OUSD. So I think that the challenge is getting folks together. But you have to start somewhere, and there's definitely a lot of willing teachers and school leaders and community members and parents that want to engage in this work. So I think that is one of the most challenging parts, but the most rewarding part is when you go into a kinder classroom at the beginning of the school year and you see children that have been going through these transitions, having an easy time saying goodbye to their parents and fewer tears. So I think that that's something that just kind of wraps it up for us.
I think we can all support fewer tears. I think we're on board with that. Scott, I want to talk with you a little bit on this one. I know that you guys have a long partnership with Alum Rock, but that doesn't mean that there weren't challenges. And if you could particularly talk to the work around dual language that you guys have been engaging in.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. And it really pertains to our work at a new campus that we just created together in partnership. It's a Birth to 5 campus on what used to be the Cesar Chavez Elementary School and is now, we call it the Cesar Chavez Early Learning Center. And it's Birth to 5. So we provide infant, toddler, childcare, preschool, and Alum Rock provides TK-K services. And it's brand new. We just opened earlier this year. And the long-term goal is for all of our classrooms to be dual immersion, as well as inclusion, because to us, that is the ideal model to serve, and meet the needs of all of our children and families. And the community that the school is in is the Mayfair community, which for a long, long time has been wanting dual immersion in English and Spanish, Vietnamese, primarily. Those are the primary languages in the community. So that's our goal. And the challenge, of course, is not only how do you do that at all age levels, but you have two organizations doing it too with very different hiring practices and teacher qualifications and, all the differences between the ECE and the TK through 12 systems. So, there's no one right way to do dual immersion. which is good. We have a lot of different approaches depending on the language skills that the teachers bring in and then the needs of the children in the classroom. But that's something we're working out together. And ultimately it comes down to relationships. For us to understand first, what are the language goals that they have for their children, learn that from the families first. What are the different models in how children can learn language that they're excited about and they would like to see their child have the opportunity to experience. And then bringing together teaching teams to discuss, all right, how do we do that, right? How do we do that with the teams we've got? What else do we need to bring to the campus in order for that to work well? So, it certainly, we're at the beginning of that work, but something that we feel is going to bring this model so much significance for the children and families we serve.
Thank you for that, Scott. And Dr. Ballesteros, from the district perspective, how are you able to maintain the focus of that vision? Because there's always competing priorities. There's always things that can take you off track. How are you able to continue that focus and that partnership so that the campus, is created, the programs are moving forward?
Well, I think it's just totally like Scott said, it's all about relationships and, the relationships in the multi-levels of trying to do, this vision here. And in those relationships is, again, I can't stress how important it is access. People have my cell phone, they can text me because it's a large campus. And so I would say about half my day, I'm getting a text from a center director, I'm getting a text from the TK teacher, and people have said, but isn't that they have your text? And I'm said, but they need somebody to talk to. And so that access, I think it's really important. It's really valuable to find a partner that has like-minded values. And, and it's very important that the mission, the vision, the values that we have are connected and that that we hold the families and the children and the teachers, in the center of the work we do. And so I think that's really important. And to have those hard conversations. We do have hard conversations, on our agenda. A lot of our families are living in poverty. And so, what are the resources we can immediately connect them to? So we have a percentage of unhoused families. And so again, the resources, we're building a capacity to support the families. One of those biggest challenges is trust. When you have a family that has just migrated, from Colombia to San Jose, the trust may not be there. And so how do you build that trust? And it's really, through support and having someone that speaks, if there's linguistic diversity, that speaks that language, and so pulling in, everybody that you can to support our families, because we are also dealing with those challenges that you mentioned. Yes, I mean, the work is extremely valuable. It's great, but we do have challenges where, every weekly meeting with our partners is individual case, and so we go through the individual cases where we bring in, all the knowledge capacity and we share ideas and stuff. So again, I would just say you can't do it without the partnerships. We need the collective wisdom. We need the collaboration to be able to do this work and do it so that our families thrive and our children thrive.
Great, thank you. And now, Luis, when we think of large, complicated systems, perhaps Los Angeles may come to the forefront of many of our minds. There's got to be some difficult navigation challenges you've had. How have you been able to maneuver through some of those?
I think as I hear everyone else share, Stephen, certainly the lack of that existing relationship, right, I think is what presents the biggest challenge here for any effective collaboration. And it's something that really needs to be addressed, right, as early as possible. So you can rely on that knowledge of wealth of information, right, that exists in the community that will really support your strategies and your efforts around implementing effective transitions. I think what's great now is that with TK becoming part of that larger early childhood education infrastructure, there really is a great opportunity before us, right, to ensure that we have those strong collaborations between elementary and all other early learning providers. And that only will support, right, implementation of TK, because so many of these children will be coming in from providers, and an intentional collaboration between the LEAs is really the opportunity presents the opportunity, I think, to mindfully prepare to support children with individual needs, especially those that are dual language learners, that have disabilities, right, or other special needs. And so knowing, right, who's out there, who's about to join your community, that is something that you can do much more easily when you have a strong relationship and collaboration with those providers out there already. I'm a firm believer of not redoing the wheel if it's already been invented, right? So reach out, tap into what exists, right? Learn from what's working well in the community and use that to leverage the work that you're going to do, especially around TK and beyond.
Thank you for that. Now I know that many of us on this call are frantically wrapping up one school year as we are also planning for the next school year. And for some in the early education world, that year just keeps going. It doesn't actually end. But for our last question for everybody, what I want you to think about is if there's one recommendation between now and the start of the next school year that folks on the ECE side or folks on the TK-12 side can do, what would you recommend that they lean into? Because we've heard about a toolkit, we've heard about a lot of relationships, we heard a lot about moving parts, but if there was one thing that you would encourage folks to lean into between now and the start of the school year, what would it be? And I think it's appropriate that we start with our teacher on the call, Ms. Robinson. What would be a recommendation for the teachers out there to think about between the end of this school year and the beginning of the next?
Family engagement. That would be a priority for me. And I'm actually partnering with them right now. Hopefully in the future, we'll be doing what we're doing at all the sites. Family engagement is really critical, getting them involved, giving them the tools, the knowledge, how to do parenting at home with their kids, and also support them while they're in the preschool. So family engagement is something I'm going to really be focusing on. I think we really need that. I didn't get a chance to share that we had an event in April engaging, we had honoring all the fathers from Lockwood CDC. We include the state pre-K on the elementary school. And it was really interesting. Only men, no women, just men. All the fathers came out. Well, 36 signed up, 22 showed up. And they all stayed to the very end, and they were so, just so elated by having this just for them. They were able to share their space about how to be better fathers, how they can do better with their children. They want to do it every month. So family engagement is one thing. So Marie and I are sitting down trying to create something where we will continue this, but how we're going to continue. So family engagement. And that was a good way to move it because we never reach out to the father. We always talk to the mothers all the time because the mother's always there. And so by bringing the fathers in, it really gave them a different perspective of what their children are doing in the school and what they need to do as parents. So family engagement for me. And I like all the other things that you guys were saying, the collaboration. It's difficult sometimes because we don't have everybody who wants to participate. And that's a challenge for me with other teachers and other school sites too. So I just wanted to say that, yes, family engagement for me.
Thank you for that. Maria, from your perspective, what would be a key move between now and August?
I'm going to echo what Ms. DeMonica said and what a lot of the participants on this panel have said around family engagement, equity, and relationships. That is really at the center of this work. I would advise folks to really focus on those bi-directional relationships between LEAs and community partners, because at the end of the day, all of our city's children are migrating into our public LEAs. And so we really need to think about aligning and just becoming, just knowing who our partners are, who's down the street, who's the school across the street from me, or who's the nonprofit preschool behind our elementary school, to really partner, because at the end of the day, that's where all the kids go. So I would say relationships, equity, and yeah, just making friends in the community to carry out this work.
Thank you for that, Maria. And Scott, I know we have a lot of early childhood providers that are on the call today. From their perspective, from your perspective, what would be something that they can be thinking about doing moving into a new school year?
I mean, it's not always logistically possible. But for us, there's nothing better than building the relationship with the child's future teacher, or bringing the teacher to the classroom, bringing children to their future classroom. Yeah, well before everything transitions, right? So that it's a familiar person, it's a familiar place for the children and their families too. That's the ideal, right? Because we all know, like, the core of everything we do is relationships, right? And so if you can start establishing them before the transition happens, that's really key, and we find is most critical for a successful transition.
Dr. Ballesteros, I know you have nothing on your plate right now. The end of the year is super smooth, but what are you thinking about that kind of nugget as you move into August?
Nothing on my plate except a 6-week summer program being planned for the district. And so I think, so I'm going to say, before the pandemic, right, we wanted to have understanding and empathy and patience. I've changed that now, that what we all need is extreme understanding, extreme patience, extreme intentionality, and extreme and robust engagement of the work that we're doing, and of course the extreme support for our families, our children, and our teachers. So it's no longer just, oh, be intentional, be this. It has to be extreme, and I think that piece of extreme to me means having access to the people that can make a difference. And that's really important. And I think also everybody just wearing their lenses, that our families come with strengths, they come with assets. The children, they are our greatest teachers. If we are open heart, open mind to learn from them, they will teach us what they need.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate those sentiments. Luis, we know we have a lot of folks from the county offices across the state listening. As you think from where you sit, what is something that somebody in a county office can really think about between now and August?
I mean, I think this is kind of sounding like a broken record now, but relationships, right? And if you can think about how to support the building a relationship between teachers and parents, but also between the early education and the elementary teachers, right? And finding the opportunities for, them to come together, to learn from each other, right? And to really plan some of these transition opportunities and events collectively. I think that goes a long way. One thing that I've seen work really effectively is you bring together a task force, a group, whatever you want to call it, right? But you make sure that you have parents on there, that you have teachers and educators, as well as administrators, and those key community partners to all lend a voice to what plan of action you're going to develop. And I think if you start there, you also are supporting that relationship building And that's just setting you on the right path for success.
I appreciate that. And just want to take a moment to thank all the panelists for their insight and expertise this afternoon, and all the hundreds of you from around the state for taking your time to lean into this challenging process. We all know there are many bureaucratic hurdles that can make the transition between preschool and kindergarten challenging. But as you heard today, if you continue to center students and families in this effort and create pathways that open doors and support learning and growth, that will achieve the result that we all want for the students of California. So thanks to all of our panelists, and I will now turn things back over to Shanna. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Stephen, and thank you so much to the panel. I so enjoyed that conversation, and I was taking so many notes of ideas that I had just listening to you all. I'm now going to, Stacy will put back up our closing slide, and I'm going to pass it back over to Sarah Neville Morgan.
Thanks so much, Shanna. I knew as soon as Stephen said bureaucrats and bureaucracy that it was time for me to come back on, and really appreciate from all of you the focus on things beyond the bureaucracy of the state that really allow for the relationships. So a true thank you, Stephen, for facilitating this panel. A real shout out. You and California Ed Partners have been such critical work partners in all of our P3 work, and really, really appreciate you. A huge, tremendous thank you to all of our panelists. So Luis, Maria, Diana, Scott, and Demonica, thank you. Your time, your expertise, your voices were all critical. Some of the key things we heard you say: relationships. Luis, I think you stole it from me. Relationships, relationships, relationships. Just like location matters, relationships are the heart of all the work we do. You asked us to focus on partnerships, collective wisdom, being accessible to families, and ensuring true, authentic family engagement, including the fathers, knowing your partners and creating strong bi relationships, tapping into the wealth of information from and in your community and leveraging it, ensuring that you use extreme patience, intentionality, and support, having an open heart and open minds, as children are our greatest teachers and their families come with such valuable assets. So thank you to everyone on here, all of you participants who shared and spent some time with us this afternoon, and to my team, Stephen, Shanna, Valentina, and everyone behind the scenes who made this happen. So Teresa, Sam, Stephen, Stacy, Anna, John, TSD, and our ASL interpreters. A reminder that you'll be getting an email from us with a link to the Transitions to Elementary School Transitions Toolkit. We're really proud of this, and thank you all. A lot of people supported and helped us with the development of it. And just as we heard from our panelists, it truly is this work at this critical time and opportunity for our children and families that we have this potential to lay the foundation for all children to succeed. As Alfie Kohn states, if children feel safe, they can take risks, ask questions, make mistakes, learn to trust, share their feelings, and grow. It is the responsibility of all educators on both sides of the transition to elementary school, from the childcare and preschool to the families to the elementary schools, to make sure children and their families feel safe and supported as they make this transition, to ensure that our schools create a sense of belonging and inclusion for all. We hope our new resource will help start conversations and support implementation of new strategies that make this kind of support something that every child and family across California feels as they enter into our public school system, and continues to feel this throughout their entire educational journey. Hope everyone has an evening filled with love and joy. This is the end of our preschool through third grade webinar, Supporting the Transition to Elementary School, a critical strategy to strengthening P3 alignment. Thank you, panelists, participants, and staff who joined us. A resource email will be circulated shortly. I wish you all a good evening.